6 months since the ID700 synth app was released. There's lots of other videos out there that talk about the synth in general and what a good emulation it is of the Buchla 700 from 1987 and some of the unique sounds that it can make. One of my main interests in iOS synths is in using them with breath control with an EWI wind instrument. When it was first released, ID700 did not have a monophonic legato mode, and now it does. You can turn on mono mode, and then within mono mode there's a choice for how to handle multiple notes if you get them. With EWI this isn't a huge deal unless you're using one of its duophonic modes or a harmonizer or a chord rotator or something like that. You're probably going to want to set it to last unless you're doing something specific like using ID700 only for the highest note or the lowest note. And you probably want to set pitch bend to 2 semitones. The next thing you're going to want to do is connect your wind controller as both a Midi notes source and a Midi control source for AUM. And then you'll need to go into the actual Midi control, and you'll choose the ID700 channel and the synth within that channel. I've been setting 3 parameters all to be controlled by breath. The first one is filter, and that's one of the most common. You can use the learn mode to record the incoming MIDI signal and just blow one note on the EWI. I also like to set filter as the displayed control that shows up on AUM on the channel, and we'll see an example of that, how that affects that later. Then, in addition to filter, I've also been setting the wave-morph A and B to be controlled by breath, and we'll see that ID700 combines 2 different waves, and by allowing breath to morph between them, you can get some really interesting variations in tone as you play softer and louder. And we'll see examples of that once we get further in. And then finally, you're going to want to set breath to also control the main output level. And on all 3 of these, you'll see that a little yellow triangle appears to warn you that you're redundantly setting the same control to different multiple outputs, and that's okay. That's exactly what we're intending to do in this place. But so now we've got breath controlling level and filter and wave-morph. The default sound uses the same wave for both A and B, so you're not hearing a bunch of variation in tone across the breath range at this point, but let's try a different sound and see if we can get a more dramatic effect. This timbres section down at the bottom of the factory presets is a good place to start because most of these will play nicely with breath. Now you can start to hear some of that color working its way in to where there's one character of the sound at lower breath levels and then it morphs to a different tonality at more intense breath levels. Let's also add some reverb because ID700 does not have a built-in reverb, and so we're going to add EOS2 as one of my favorite reverb apps, and it always adds a lot of roominess to the sound. If we use the screen to toggle between the views of wave A and wave B, you can visually see the waveform that's being generated. This is fundamentally additive synthesis. You can see in the lower right column there, you've got all the harmonics listed and their relative levels, and it's the combination of those harmonic settings that determines the shape of the wave in the lower center view. So to sum up, ID700 with its most recent enhancement is now very capable of being used in very interesting and musical ways by a breath-controlled instrument like the EWI. And because it has a fairly unique architecture of its sound engine, it's capable of making sounds that you might not otherwise hear from a more traditional analog subtractive synth or even a sampler. So it's been an interesting synth to add to the collection, and I plan to continue exploring it and using it more in the future.
Wow.